A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Coming up on the program in just a matter of moments, Ellie Bufkin is going to join us, townhall.com writer, discussing the myth of a moderate Joe Biden, and that's exactly what it is. We did see Biden rack up some impressive wins on, Super Tuesday 2 is what I think I should call it Super Duper Tuesday. But anyway, he ended up sweeping very, very close. You look at the delegates, and Bernie Sanders still getting some delegates, right? It's not like Bernie Sanders was shut out of acquiring delegates last night, but he didn't pick up a single victory in terms of winning the state. And so the pressure is now on Bernie Sanders to drop out of the race, to go ahead and anoint Joe Biden the candidate. And already you're starting to see the spin surrounding Joe Biden's policies and what a moderate guy he is. He was the choice of the middle, right? So you got Donald Trump on one extreme, and then you had Bernie Sanders on the other extreme, and then there's Joe Biden just right there, middle of the road Joe. And that is not the case, particularly when it comes to your right to keep and bear arms, because Biden's policies are, even before he said, hey, Beto, come here, I want to put you in charge of my gun control plans. Even before he said that, Biden's anti-gun agenda would have made him the most anti-gun presidential candidate in history. In fact, the sad thing is, no matter who won the Democratic primary, no matter who gets the nomination, and again, it's likely going to be Joe Biden, but no matter who were to get that, every one of those candidates on that first debate stage, every one of them would have been the most anti-gun presidential candidate in American history. Joe Biden is no exception. His plans, as outlined on his own campaign platform, would turn millions of Americans into felons for simply maintaining possession of the firearms and the magazines that they currently own. Because Joe Biden wants you to get a retroactive permission slip to continue to possess your AR-15s, to continue to possess your 15 or 20 round magazines. And by the way, it's not just a permission slip. It's going to cost you some money. It's going to require you registering your firearms and your magazines. I don't even know how you register your magazines, but it will require you to register your magazines with the federal government. And that's just a small portion of what Joe Biden's gun control plans entail. Joining me to talk about that and more, Ellie Bufkin, townhall.com writer, who's got a great piece at Town Hall right now. No, Joe Biden is not a moderate. Take a look and a listen. Ellie, it's good talking with you. Thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Cam.
You bet. So it looks like Biden's going to be the guy for Democrats, and there are a lot of disappointed and butthurt Bernie Sanders supporters today. You write about this at Town Hall, and it's interesting. You know, there were a lot of folks on the left, including AOC and others, who were complaining on social media about, gosh, what a conservative, moderate Joe Biden is, and how this isn't the progressive leader that Democrats need to take them into the future. But you've got a column at Town Hall that I would encourage everybody to read, because Joe Biden is no moderate. Under any standard, Joe Biden is not a moderate, Ellie.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess under the standard of you want absolute socialism in this country, no wiggle room, absolutely nothing American, throw out the Constitution. I guess in that sense, he's still a moderate. But if you're talking about conservatives and liberals in the sense that I've always understood it, he's absolutely pro-choice up to the point of he argued against a partial birth abortion ban. He has no interest in anybody having guns in this country. He's talked openly about taking AR-15s, for reasons that are not backed up by any type of statistic or science, or police records or anything like that. He has an F rating from the NRA. He wants Beto O'Rourke to help him lead the charge of taking guns away from people. This is all stuff that's on the record. So if that's your thing, then that's that. If you want to talk about climate change, he's got all these plans for eliminating greenhouse gases and moving into electric cars and all that stuff. Maybe he doesn't, espouse the Green New Deal, but who does? It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. He's trying to get elected, also. So there's that. But there's just absolutely nothing about the guy that speaks to moderate or central lane or, working with two parties at all.
Oh no, absolutely.
Even in 2020, yeah.
And going back to the gun issue, because that's what we like to talk about here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. It's fascinating to me that a lot of the reaction yesterday from the left to Biden's incident in Michigan, where he threatened to slap a voter in the face, and said that he was full of shit, and so on and so forth. And by the way, did not actually accurately describe his own gun control agenda.
He didn't accurately say anything.
Well, okay, that's true. But a lot of folks on the left were ignoring all that. They're like, "Oh, look, he fights. Oh, I love to see this." He fights, but he ended up basically punching himself in the face in terms of that exchange with this voter. And as you point out, I mean, the fact that he has said, Beto O'Rourke, you're my guy on gun control. Beto's still out there talking about mandatory confiscation. It's not like
he's talking about police rolling up to people's houses and taking their guns or arresting them.
Right.
I mean,
and so, if Joe Biden doesn't want to run on Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke's gun control platform, maybe he should speak out a little bit more, because right now the guy who he says he's going to task with leading the gun control efforts is still saying, hell yes, we're coming for your AR-15.
Right. Yeah. If he's saying AR-15s, AK-47s, we're coming for them. We're going to arrest you. We're going to drag you out of your house if you don't hand over your guns, that we know you have registered. I mean, to me, that's like some, dystopian version of the United States that like they make horror movies out of. But I guess to Beto and to Biden now, that's control policies that they want. Two guns that are almost never involved in shooting crimes in this country.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is, and this was one of the things that voter brought up in Michigan and said, okay, why are you interested in these rifles that aren't used in crimes when handguns are used more often? And that was the moment, by the way, when Biden walked away. Right. He didn't even try to answer that question.
Right, because he can't, because there's just no answer to it.
Right. But, Biden calls himself, he said yesterday, I'm a Second Amendment supporter. Then he talked about, I have a shotgun. I got a 12 gauge. I got a 20 gauge. My son's hunt. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I want to hear, and I don't even know if we're going to have any more debates between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, but I want to hear somebody ask this question to Joe Biden. All right, so if you're a Second Amendment supporter, give me an example of a gun control proposal or a gun law that's on the books right now that you feel goes too far, that does actually infringe on the Second Amendment rights of Americans. Because if you're a Second Amendment supporter, there's got to be some law on the books somewhere that you as a Second Amendment supporter have a problem with. But we never hear that, right? It's I'm a Second Amendment supporter, and here's what I want to do to restrict the rights of legal gun owners in the country.
Any kind of proposal of any kind of gun control that would make sense for gun owners at all.
Talking again with our friend Ellie Bufkin from Town Hall. So I'm curious, Ellie, where do you see this race going here in the general election? A lot of folks just a couple of weeks ago thought that we were headed towards a contested convention. Now it's, the primary, I hate to say it's almost over because there are still a number of states that are left to vote, but Biden clearly in command for the Democratic nomination. There's a lot of pressure on Bernie Sanders right now to drop out. I don't think he does, but I suppose I could be wrong about that. Are we going to shift from a sort of from a primary model to a general election feel here? And will Bernie Sanders sort of be the forgotten man? Is this now about Biden versus Trump?
That's where I think it should go. If the Democrats are smart, I'm not sure how much they can control what Bernie Sanders does. Mm-hmm. He's obviously more than welcome to jump on as a third party, and maybe that would invigorate enough people. Obviously doesn't make sense to me, but it would pull enough people away from Biden that would be nice if he did it. But, I don't know that that's what he's going to do. I don't see him just dropping out willingly. He's gone on at this long. I think it would maybe, unless he's not feeling well and he's old and he's just tired and he wants to quit after a hugely disappointing primary season. But other than that, he's been gung ho. He survived a heart attack. I see him sticking with it, for as long as he possibly can. And, bringing it to a brokered convention if that's where it needs to go.
What about Biden? You look at some of the results from Tuesday night around the country, and it's pretty staggering. Basically, if you voted in the Democrat primary and you're under the age of 40, odds are you voted for Bernie Sanders. If you are over the age of 40, odds are you voted for Joe Biden. And it wasn't even close. I mean, in a lot of states, it was 70% of those under the age of 40 voted for Bernie Sanders, 80% of those over the age of 40 voting for Joe Biden. There is a clear generational divide among Democrat voters right now. And again, as you point out, a lot of these Sanders supporters, they're very angry right now. They're not eagerly embracing Biden. Do they eventually come into the fold? Do they stay home? Do they vote third party? Where do the Sanders voters go, you think?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that the Sanders voters stayed home yesterday and last week, because it looks like, and we're still waiting for a lot of the numbers to come in, and for those to be processed and for that data to get out. But the early estimates are showing that the internet presence that seemed so strong in support of Sanders did not reflect the amount of young voters that showed out for him yesterday and last week. So it'll be interesting to see. But, that's obviously a problem that the Democrats have had for a long time, is motivating the youngest of generation first-time voters to actually leave their homes and vote, particularly in primaries. That may not be something that is even considered. The people who voted for Sanders in the primaries, I think, were maybe not as many young people as you think. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, you're right. Let's put it this way. A lot of the young people who voted for Bernie Sanders. But
right.
There weren't a lot of younger voters,
right?
Right. I think in Michigan, the breakdown that I saw last night before I went to bed, it was basically 30% of the primary vote was under the age of 40, and 70% was over the age of 40. That's a pretty gray primary. And I
40,
think that
40 is not like super young.
No,
that's a lot of voting age under 40.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm right there. I'm right there. So, but I'm just saying.
It's young, Ellie. It's young.
It is still very young. But I'm just saying there's a lot of voters under that age. So, if that's the benchmark, that's a lot of people to account for. However, they're not going to go to Trump. They're not going to jump from Sanders to Trump. So either they stay home or they show up for Biden. Now, I don't think Biden and Sanders, from what we're reading on Twitter, which, Twitter's not real life. But I know they want to defeat Trump. That's what they keep saying anyway. They want to get him out of the White House, at all costs. It's anyone but Trump. That's all they say. That's all they keep saying.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're to stay true to that, then they should leave, and we should expect them to show up for Biden.
I think that ultimately we will see that, at least to some large degree. Some will stay home. Some will, vote for Vermin Supreme for a Libertarian. That's my choice, by the way, for Libertarian, Vermin Supreme. But again, I think you're right. I think by and large, the Democrat Party has been an anti-Trump party since 2016. That's right. In essence why it exists. And so if you can't get your base, particularly those younger voters, to show up on election day and try to vote out Donald Trump, you are toast. I think as an organized political force. On the other hand, I think the Trump campaign is well aware now. Okay, Biden's going to be our candidate. They may have wanted to run against Bernie Sanders. They may have wanted to portray this as a battle of, capitalism versus socialism. But I think that, frankly, I think Joe Biden has given the Trump campaign a lot to work with here in the weeks and months ahead.
I think so too. I will just register one concern, and it really dawned on me as I was watching Biden, because we were so expecting Bernie to do better. And as I was watching Biden just sweep these. He won every single county in Michigan, Missouri, and Mississippi, which is kind of shocking. Especially Michigan. But I was worried. I'm a little worried that there are some people who are not into Trump, who didn't vote for him in 2016, but are maybe kind of conservative, that are going to jump to Biden. I actually kind of polled it on Twitter last night, sort of put the feelers out, and I got, a lot more responses than I was hoping for. People who are like, I'll vote for him. I mean, I'm pro-life and I'm pro-gun, but I mean, I hate Trump. He's crazy. He's going to destroy this country. He's a Nazi. And I was like, oh man, these are just CNN talking points. And like, it's like the anyone but Trump stuff. It's like, this is wrong. Like, you can't vote for this guy if you're a conservative.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Well, I mean, look, as you say, Twitter is not real life, but those results,
and it was like 6 people. I was hoping for 0.
But listen, what you just talked about Biden winning every county in Michigan and Mississippi and Missouri, that's closer to real life than Twitter is. And
that's right.
And we saw yesterday, that the media is very invested, and Biden's surrogates are very invested. The Democrat Party is very invested in this idea of Biden the moderate, Biden the statesman, Biden the fighter, to the point that, they will misrepresent the things that Joe Biden says and does in an attempt to portray him as a more moderate guy. And so I think, whether it's your column, whether it's this interview here, we have a lot of education to do between now and Election Day to let people know, look, that's the spin, that's the narrative, and here's the reality when it comes to Joe Biden and his policies.
Right. Because you're exactly right. Because the DNC wants people to think like, hey, you can come over. It's safe over here. You don't have to vote for him again. Like, he is crazy. He is a nationalist. Biden's he's going to take care of you. He's a normal person. We're going to go back to normal. Remember all that? Like, we didn't have all this crazy tweets and all that stuff. That's what we have over here. And that's what I was trying to prove in my column, which was, no. And I'm trying to convince, no, Linda Sarsour, this is your guy.
Right.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this is your guy. Listen, here's all the things that you think he isn't. He is. And if he isn't them now, then he can be for like $1. Like, you don't have to push him that hard. He'll be whoever you want him to be. He has changed his mind more than anyone else in political history. And that is really saying something.
Absolutely.
He's been in politics for 50 years. He came to Washington, 1973? That's when he first was elected to the Senate, I think, as a very young man. And at that point, his first thing he said, he has this interview with, I think it was Vanity Fair, but I could be misquoting that. And he said, now famously, because people have dug it up, that he didn't think Roe v. Wade was a good idea. And, and that women, babies should have the right to life. And he said all that. And it was like a week later, he's like, well, no, it's the standard of, and then I immediately starts into this like puddle hopping into the extremely far left person that he is now 50 years later. And that's just to prove, like, every time he changes his mind, and I think I said this in my article, and which he does 5 times every day before breakfast, it's always to the left, never to the right.
Yeah.
So, earlier this year, he still believed in the Hyde Amendment, and now he doesn't. A few years ago, he was saying, well, maybe more common sense gun control. And then as soon as he got more involved, with Obama and more, strongly, gun control minded politician, it only took a few years and he's, given an F from the NRA. Even Bernie Sanders got a D-. It's just,
well, listen, if you're a Democrat primary voter and you're looking for the pro Second Amendment candidate, there's not one. Sorry. I mean, you don't even have a Jim Webb type who was running this year.
And that was interesting. The man that he was in a confrontation with yesterday in Detroit at the car manufacturer is the most unheard of creature in all of the United States, which is a liberal gun nut. I'm sure they exist.
They're there. Listen, I can tell you they exist. They're out there. I think they're.
Well, he's on Fox this morning, and he's talking about how much he loves guns, and he's like listing all these guns he has, and how he loves to go shooting, and he loves to, conceal carry, and it's really important to him and his buddies. And then he's talking about how, well, he hates Trump because he doesn't, he doesn't support this intersectional, stuff. And I'm like, what?
It is interesting. I have said, many times before that the Second Amendment is, I think, the biggest tent movement in the United States, because you do find people from all across the political spectrum, from the most rock-ribbed conservatives to Bernie-loving Democrat socialists, who also love their right to keep and bear arms. Unfortunately, we're at a moment in time where basically one party and one party alone is out there trying to protect that right. And I don't think I don't think that's good for the Second Amendment. I have said, as long as I've been covering this issue, that gun owners will be better off when this is a nonpartisan issue, when you have pro-gun Democrats, pro-gun Republicans, and both sides are fighting to keep our rights secure. So I applaud. I think his name's Kelly, Mr. Kelly, up in Michigan was that gentleman's name, and I applaud him for trying to push his party in the right direction when it comes to the right to keep your arms. I just it's an uphill fight right now. I think last poll that I saw was about 1 in 5 Democrats say that they think gun control laws are too strict, and about 4 out of 5 say no, we need more gun control laws. So they're out there, but they are a minority voice in the party.
And I think that's the reason that Robert Francis Beto crashed and burned as hard as he did. I mean, he leaned so hard into the gun thing, and I know he was just reacting to the El Paso shooting. He was trying to be, touchy-feely. I understand where he was coming. To be honest, because he has no idea what he's talking about, I think his heart was kind of in a good place. However, the policies that he was espousing in the aftermath were terrifying. I mean, the idea that this man could be in the White House, I was like, where would I go? What would I do? I mean, I was already like doomsday planning, like in case there was just any chance this could happen.
Buy some land in West Virginia, establish the kingdom of Bufkin.
Oh, I have a plan.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm not telling you what it is.
Okay, no, you don't have to. Listen, I don't want you to spoil it for anybody. But and you're
might have to do with West Virginia.
And you're very kind, by the way. You're much more gracious towards Beto O'Rourke than I am, because I look, yes, I do believe that a lot of gun control supporting politicians believe on some level that there would be less crime, that there would be less violence if we had these types of gun control laws in place. But I also don't think they do their due diligence to actually look at what the real effects of these policies are and whether or not they work to reduce crime. I also happen to believe that most gun owners want to see less crime and less violence. I don't believe that there's any moral high ground to be found in calling for these gun bans. Even if your heart's in the right place, your mind is way off track if you're out there trying to reduce violent crime by taking away people's Second Amendment rights. That, unfortunately, is what we're facing right now with Biden and Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke and all of the rest of the merry misfits that Joe Biden has gathered around him. Listen, Ellie, I appreciate you coming on the program, and I hope that we get a chance to have you on again very soon. Again, the column at Town Hall right now. Joe Biden is not a moderate Democrat. Go check that out. And Ellie, thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
All right, so let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We'll start there from Connecticut. The Hartford Courant reporting on the case of Anthony Torres. That's the gentleman on the left, and Jose Ramos. We're going to focus on Mr. Torres. The pair were involved in a shootout with police officers on an interstate, undercover Hartford police officers. And a month ago, the Hartford Courant says Anthony Torres tried to plead guilty to being the driver of this car, from which several shots were fired at police officers. But the judge at the time refused to take his guilty plea because she said, I'm not sure you're in your right mind. Torres was out on bail. He was under court order not to use illegal drugs, which, again, they're illegal drugs. Anyway, testing, however, according to the Hartford Courant, revealed that Torres had used marijuana as well as fentanyl. Mm-hmm. So the judge said, no, I'm not going to take your plea bargain. We're going to put you in jail. Continued his case for about a month and then brought him back, and he pled guilty again. And this time the judge accepted his guilty plea. The Hartford Courant says that Torres was behind the wheel of a car from which his co-defendant, Jose Ramos, fired several shots at what turned out to be undercover Hartford police officers back on March 28th of 2019. The officers inside had seen Torres and Ramos engage in a drug deal. They were following them. In fact, several unmarked police cruisers were following the two. Torres and Ramos focused on an Acura SUV that they thought was suspicious. When the Acura drove past the pair, that's when Ramos pulled out a pistol and opened fire. The officers were not injured. However, a chase ensued. The pair briefly eluded police and eventually were caught on Interstate 84. According to the Hartford Courant, the gun, by the way, had been reported stolen in a burglary on Long Island in 2015. The prosecutor, Chris Pelosi, told the judge that Ramos had taken full responsibility for the shooting. He said that he thought that the people in the Acura were other drug dealers. He said that Torres had no idea that he had a gun. Torres' lawyer said her client had no idea that a gun was in the car. So, he just thought he was engaging in a little drug deal. And then, now, why did he keep driving, though? That's the part that kind of, okay, fine, all right. So you didn't know there was a gun until the gun was pulled, and then the gun was fired. And then clearly after that point, you saw that, these were not drug dealers. These were police officers because you were being chased by police officers. And at that point, why didn't you stop? Why don't you get out of the car with your hands up and say, officer, I didn't know anything about this. Anyway, under his plea agreement, Torres sentenced to 4 years in prison, but he won't do 4 years. 18 months is what he's supposed to serve. He'll get time off for good behavior. He'll get credit for time served. He has to perform 50 hours of community service. Then he'll be on 3 years probation. So in less than a year, Torres will be out for his involvement in this crime. Ramos, by the way, pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree assault and criminal possession of a gun, and was, because convicted felon, and was sentenced to a total of 7 years in prison. He won't do, again, all 7, and 5 years of special parole. So he'll be out, I'm guessing, in less than 5. Mr. Torres, again, I'm guessing will be out in a matter of months. And they are today's recidivist report. Our armed citizen story of the day from Colorado, where a man who shot and killed a home intruder in Wheat Ridge will not be charged. Police say that this is based on the Make My Day law in Colorado, or the Castle Doctrine law. In essence, I don't even really think that the Castle Doctrine applies. I mean, this was a case of somebody who was in their own home, and a home invasion occurred. Taquan Wilson was killed inside this home in Wheat Ridge. The homeowner told police that the intruder, who he did not know, broke into his home, was aggressive. Homeowner said he feared for his family's lives as well as his life, and he fired one shot, killing Wilson, who was pronounced dead at the scene. The prosecutor, in announcing that no charges would be filed, the police chief, in announcing that no charges would be filed, said, quote, "This was a difficult case for our detectives as well as both families who were devastated by the death of the intruder. Regardless of the crime that was committed, one family lost a loved one and another is faced with the long-term impact of taking a life in the course of protecting his family." That is undeniably true. But I'm still curious as to why this was a difficult case for these detectives, because it does seem like, despite the tragedy that occurred here, the tragedy was brought on by this individual breaking into somebody's home and committing a home invasion. So I'm not sure what was difficult, perhaps emotionally difficult, but legally speaking, this was a pretty clear-cut case of armed self-defense. And finally, our good deed of the day, Phoenix, Arizona, where Channel 10 reporting on a group of Good Samaritans came to the aid of a truck driver. I mean, if you look at this crash, it's amazing that anybody survived. That hole that you see there in the center of your screen, that is a concrete wall, concrete barrier on an interstate, and a semi-truck had just slammed into this and then burst into flames. According to WSLS, multiple Good Samaritans parked their cars, worked together, trying to lift the wreckage to get the driver out. Witnesses said the driver's legs were pinned. He was unable to escape. Shane Fisher was one of the individuals who stopped. He said, "Me and several other guys grabbed it, and we picked up on it, got the weight up off of him. He says, we all grabbed the cab, picked up. He says, I'm surprised that we were able to lift it up, but they were. Crews arrived on the scene, were able to extricate the driver, took him to a local hospital, and he is recovering tonight thanks to the actions of all of those strangers in the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing. We thank you all for your very, very good deed. That is all of our show for you here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information, including a look at what's going on in Rhode Island tonight. It is gun bill night in Rhode Island. About 18 different gun bills slated to be heard. We'll give you an update on all of them. Some of them are really, really bad bills, including bills dealing with so-called assault weapons, background checks, and more. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Bearing Arms Cam and Company by subscribing to Town Hall Media on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page. You can also become a VIP member of Bearing Arms at bearingarms.com. Get exclusive analysis, commentary, and more. And you can support our Second Amendment journalism each and every day. We certainly do appreciate that support. Have a great rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company.